My name is Leo Ruffing. I was born in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, August 3rd, 1931, in a section called East Liberty.
And how do you pronounce your last name?
Ruffing, R-U-F-F-I-N-G, but in Germany, where my family come from, they had an umlaut over the U. And my father said they pronounced it with a roofing, you know, but they were so poor they could not afford to bring the umlaut with them. So the name became Ruffing.
Ruffing.
Yeah.
Okay.
My mother's parents come from Ireland, 1847, during the famine.
Oh, that famous famine.
Yes.
How did Irish and German get along each other?
We got along very well because where I lived, there was in the days that I grew up, Pittsburgh was divided ethnically. You know where the Pittsburgh Steelers Stadium is?
Yeah.
That was Chinatown. So now it's a football field. Where I grew up at the upper part of Lincoln Avenue, was German. They spoke German and Latin in the church. At the bottom of the hill was Italians. They spoke Italian and Latin. And where I lived was Irish. And so they spoke English with Irish accent and English. Well, I'm one of 9. My oldest brother was a world-class engineer, worked for Allied Electric. My next brother is next is a sister. She's a retired college professor, taught computer science. She's older than I am. My next sister was a business lady. She's passed on. She was a real estate manager. The next one is a clinical psychologist, PhD. Then myself. And then, well, I'm a minister, yeah, Disciples of Christ.
Do you serve in the Korean War Veterans Association?
Yes, I'm the national chaplain.
National chaplain?
Yes.
Since when?
For about 5 years now. I've replaced Leonard Stegman, who was the chaplain for some years. And he retired and I took his place. Must be about 5 or 6 years now, I'm not sure.
Okay. What were you doing when the time that the Korean War broke out?
When the Korean War, I was interested. I was in Japan in the Army of Occupation from 1948, and my time ran out in March of 1950. So I was in the 7th Infantry Division at Sendai, Japan. You know where the earthquake hit, tore up Sendai?
Sendai, yes.
Yeah, Sendai, where the nuclear power plant, the tsunami. See, I was in Sendai from the end of 1948 until March of 1950.
Wow.
And
Sendai was beautiful, right?
well, yeah, beautiful place. And so my time ran out in March, and I came home. And I was in the States. I was at Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania, training basics.
I see. Training basics of
Basic training. No, I was trainer. I was a PT instructor.
I see.
And I had a very strange military career. And so I was a PT instructor for basic draftees. And then I volunteered to go to Korea.
When?
In 1950, when I wanted to go back and join my unit. But fortunately, the Army works very slow sometimes. So by the Army being slow, I missed the Chosin campaign. I'm glad I missed it. It was very fortunate. So I didn't get back to Korea until 1951. And as strange as it may seem, I do not remember what month I went back. It seems like it was in the spring. My records were burned in St. Louis in the fire. So I tried to find out what month I went there, but I could not find out.
So let's go back before 1948. When did you join the military?
September 1948.
And why?
I have no idea.
You enlisted or drafted?
I enlisted.
Why did you join the military?
I have no idea.
You just did it?
I was a black sheep in my family.
Are you sure?
I'm sure. I had trouble with alcohol.
Oh.
Very, very young.
Where did you start to drink?
About age 13. When I finished the 9th grade in school, they told me don't come back for the 10th. In those days, that's what they did. They didn't. Now they do all kind of stuff now, but in those days they tell you, don't bother coming back.
But didn't you require to have a parent's permission to join the army at the time?
I don't remember. I was 17, so my mother must have given me. My father was dead, so mother must have given me permission. But I joined the army at 17.
Mm-hmm. So you want to get away of those?
I have no idea. I just did things on impulse. Like I said, and I had trouble in the army. I went in the army a private. I served 4 years. I came out a private. I went over to Korea in the spring.
Yeah. And then you
came back in December. Okay, I got discharged.
You're right.
In February 1952, I enlisted in the Air Force.
Did you take the troop ship, or how did you get
troop ship?
Okay, from where?
I went to Japan first on a troop ship. I came home from Japan on a troop ship. I went to Korea in 51 on a troop ship.
Directly, not by way of Japan?
Straight there.
Straight to Korea?
Yes.
Huh.
I came back from Korea on a troop ship. That's the time I met Pete. Okay, now in 1954, I went back on a troop ship and I flew home. So I crossed the Pacific on the troop ship 5 times. Flew back once.
Tell me about Pete, who later became the husband of your younger sister, Alice.
Okay, when I left, I was up in Chuncheon. That's where I spent most of my time in Korea. I only went to the front one time. And when my time was up, I went from Chuncheon to Incheon on a train. When I got on the train, this great big corporal, Pete was a big man. He got on the train and he walked back. He looked around. There's plenty of empty seats. And he sat down beside me and put out his hand. He said, "I'm Pete." And so we got to talking. And we found out I'm from Pittsburgh. And he's from a place called Butler, which is a suburb. And so we, started lying to each other. You know how GIs do. And we talked and talked. And we went to Incheon. And we were supposed to get on the train on the boat. But during the night, a British freighter had swung around and knocked a hole in the boat we were supposed to come home on. So they put us back on the train and took us to Pusan. Then they put us on, we stayed in Pusan a couple of days. They put us on a ferry and we went to Sasebo, Japan. We stayed at Sasebo some period of time. And then the boat with the hole in it, it was the J.C. Martinez was the name of the boat. They put us on the boat and went up to Yokosuka to the Navy Yard. And they repaired that boat, welded on it, and then we came home on that boat. Then we got a troop train and went to Indiantown Gap, Pennsylvania. And I got discharged first. I got discharged 13th of December.
What was your specialty, actually?
Well, my specialty was a 4.2 mortar. A mortar.
Right.
And I was assigned to a 4.2 mortar company, but all I did guard duty and stayed. I only went to the front one time.
One time?
One time.
When was that and where?
We went up, it was up somewhere east. I don't even remember. It was somewhere east of the Punch Bowl. And I remember vividly what I saw was we were at this base camp and I saw F-86s dropping napalm on this mountain and these guys getting ready to go up there. And that's as close as I got to the front lines. I did not, I don't know why. I don't know if you know anything about it, that period of time. Margaret Chase Smith was a United States Congresswoman. and she may have been the first one. Well, she was leading some committee, to end the stuff in Korea.
Margaret?
Chase Smith, I think her name was. I believe that's right. And they were really pushing for reservists and National Guard to come home and leave this business to the regular Army. I think one of the other guys that was in here talking said he was only in Korea about 6 weeks. That was all part of the same stuff. But she pushed for the people, the reservists and the National Guard. See, I was a reservist because when I got out of the Army, I transferred into the reserves. So, but she was pushing for, and so I didn't stay my full tour in Korea. But whatever was going on, I don't know much. I was high school dropout. I didn't know anything about politics. But I just remember that, reading that. And so I came home. So I spent my time, we had the Ethiopian troops with us, and I spent my time at Chuncheon. And I only went, I remember, I'll never forget that. I remember so vividly, we went up the mountains, and you could look down and see clouds, up in way north. And when the tanks were coming down the mountains, they made us get out and stand on the edge of the road. Because the tanks get too close to the edge and they might break off, fall down in. But it was okay if we fell down, They didn't want to lose the tank. But I remember that. I remember going up there, and I stayed a little while. I'm not sure how many days. Like I said, I was drinking a lot. And but
at that time too?
Oh yes. That's not a good place to be drunk, but I was up there, and but anyhow, I didn't stay long. I remember the first sergeant telling me, go back to Chuncheon, and then I went back to Chuncheon, and then they told me it was time to go home.
Where did you get all these drinks?
Well, it was very cheap at that time. Beer, whiskey.
They provide you whiskey too?
Yes, you could buy it in the clubs, and or you could steal it. If you drink like I did on the private's pay, you don't have a whole lot of money.
Right.
So sometimes you steal it.
How much were you paid?
I think I figured out one time was $18.75 a week.
You are the pastor here, right?
No, I have never been a pastor.
Okay.
I'm a minister. But all my work has been with alcohol and drug programs, street people. I went to seminary.
When?
1971, 72, after I retired from the Air Force. I got a doctorate in ministry.
What made you to get into the ministry?
Well, it's a funny story. I was in college in Missouri, in Parkville, Missouri, and I went with a bunch of friends, and I tried to help a fella. What was it? Al was his name, and we got to talking one time, and Al had a problem with alcohol, and he never got sober. He died drunk. He was a PhD clinical psychologist. Could not stay sober. But before he died, we were talking, and I was going to go, at that time, the merging nations in South Africa were doing a lot of developing air forces and stuff like that. And they were looking for people, like my background by this time was electronics and business, ground navigation. And so I was going to go to South Africa and make money. That was my plan. And one day Al talked to me, and he said, "You ought to be ashamed of yourself." I said, "Why is that?" He said, "You should be going and doing work in the field of alcoholism, trying to help these people instead of talking about making money, because you have the skill, you have the experience." And so Al changed my life.
What school did you go for seminary?
Lexington Theological Seminary, and then Bethany. But while I was in Korea, before I got sober, I did a lot of work with the children and the missionaries. And some of them impressed my life. Some of the missionaries, early missionaries in Seoul, and the Seventh-day Adventists had a hospital outside of Seoul. I went there, and I worked with some of the local missionaries. But they all impressed my life.
That's when you were in Korea, in Chuncheon.
No, that's when I was in Pyeongtaek.
Pyeongtaek?
When I went back in 1954, I volunteered to go back to Korea.
You did?
With the Air Force, yes. And so I went back, and they sent me to Pyeongtaek. And Pyeongtaek, there were a lot of refugees, a lot of little children, and we had kids. We had little boys living on our base. And I remember when I may have told you about when the order came out to get rid of them. They sent them all to orphanages, and one boy came back, and he told the colonel. He said, "I'm not a gook. I'm a GI."
Huh?
He thought he was one of us. Huh? He said at the orphanage, he said he said here they have one boy, 2 blankets. Down there at the orphanage they have 2 boys, 1 blanket. And everybody's crying, the colonel and everybody else, but we had to send him back.
Wow.
But that was a very interesting work, very rewarding work, working with the orphanages.
What do you think God's plan was for you in the past and now?
To get my attention and make me do the right thing. I was ashamed of what I was doing. My mother, she was an awesome lady. When she was 92 years old, she was still doing volunteer work in the VA hospital and at a senior citizen center. And people would say, "What are you doing, Catherine?" She said, "Well, I'm helping them old people." And, my family, I come from a good family. And here I am, the black sheep. It just didn't fit in. So I didn't want to live like that. And I don't think, one of my friends said sometime back, he said, "We're all God's kids, and our job is to take care of other kids."
What do you think was the will of God on Korean War?
I don't know, maybe to maintain the South free. Sometimes when I first went to Korea, first time, I was in an Army compound, and I'm 17 years old, 18 years old, and I don't understand all this. I've always been a reader, and my oldest brother was in the Second World War. My uncle, I knew, but I was scared. And I sat down in the compound one night in the corner, and I cried. I was so scared. And then I got quiet, and I thought, I didn't know about plans or anything, but I thought, my responsibility is to go north. No matter what happens, I'm going to go north and do what I'm supposed to do. And so I went. I never had that kind of fear again. I mean, I'm not crazy, I don't want anybody shooting at me, but I never had that kind of fear again. And so just do the next right thing. And that's the way I've tried to live my life, God lets me know as I go along what I'm supposed to do. Like, I really believe, Dr. Hahn, you remember the story about the burning bush? Moses?
Oh, yeah.
And the burning bush?
Yes.
After he saw the bush and talked to God, God told him, "Go talk to Pharaoh." That's a bad position he was in. And he said, "Who should I say sent me?" And God said, "I am." Okay, I am. So when I think about God, I think about I am. When Philip stopped Christ and he said, "Where is this kingdom you talk about?" He said that Christ said, "The kingdom of God is within you." So the kingdom of God, as far as I'm concerned, is within you and me and these other guys you talk to. And what is the plan? When God said, "I am," okay, the plan is right now for you and I to be sitting here talking. There's nothing else in this world that matters except you and I sitting here talking to each other. That's just God's plan.
What was the happiest moment in your service in Korea?
One of the happiest moments I remember, there was a lady in Pittsburgh named Alda Getting, and she and my mother were friends. And my mother told her, because mother and I changed letters all the time. And I told mother about this one orphanage where I was going, taking cereal and whatever I could get for the little kids. It was girls. I think there were 20 of them, about so big. And mother told Miss Gettings about those little girls. And Mrs. Gettings, I got a newspaper article somewhere about it, but Mrs. Gettings took these and made dolls about 24 inches high out of cloth, and made a little dress for each doll, and made a matching dress for each girl. I remember when I got this box, it was in late 1954, right before Christmas, big box. And I opened it up, and there was 20 dolls and 20 dresses.
What is the legacy of Korean War and Korean War veterans? What is the importance of it? What is the legacy of the Korean War?
Well, the whole thing about if you forget history, you're going to repeat it. If we don't take it serious what's going on over there right now, there's going to be some bad stuff happen. We need to pay attention to what's happening. We need to pay attention to what's going on, everywhere.
So how would you say to this question that the impact of your service in the Korean War on your life?
On my life? Changed my life. It helped me. It helped me understand other people. Now, I grew up in a multicultural organization, mixed schools, blacks and whites and everything. But I never really understood that we grow up, some of my playmates when I was growing up come from countries that didn't speak English. A lot of the black kids, their grandparents could not read or write. Their parents couldn't read or write. And so I come from a literary culture. And these kids come from an oral culture. Got to understand how can that mesh and be like when I went to Eastern Kentucky the first time. I come to understand what a oral culture that is. The storytelling. That's where I learned to tell stories. Of course, my dad was a storyteller, but in Eastern Kentucky, my best friend, he's dead now, but Boyd introduced me to Jesse Stewart, and Harry Caudell, and these other writers, Edgar Sweeney, these other mountain writers, and it just so. As a matter of fact, I got in a heated argument with my major professor at graduate school. He was talking about Appalachia and talking about them people being culturally deprived. I said, that's a sick term. These people have their own culture. It's extremely rich. It's oral. And to say that they're deprived of a culture is ridiculous. My wife's family came to this country in 1713, and they settled in North Carolina, and in 1750 they migrated up into Appalachia, into eastern Kentucky. They were the first settlers up there. Nobody lived there at the time. The Indians migrated from New York to North Carolina, the Algonquins. Nobody lived up there. So these people, mostly Scotch and Irish, and they settled up and they developed tremendous oral culture.
Do you have a plan for the rest of your life?
It's enjoy it. I'm going to enjoy it. I have an 11-month-old granddaughter, and she's awesome. I say if I'm still around when she's 16, she'll take my car away from me.
All right. Any message to the young generations of America?
Well, understand the Korean people. When we look at each other, we may look a little different, but in our heart and soul, there's no difference. You know, we're human beings, and the human history. Just I've read a lot of, you know, what they theorize about what happened. Think about the first person. You know, they wrapped themselves in animal skins, and then one of them thought about the idea, let's put some holes in here, and we put this on. And then another one thought maybe we could button it up. That was a human being, you know, sitting there thinking, you know, how to survive, how to keep warm. And you know, John Deal's story that just died, one of our veterans. He was in North Korea at the Chosin. And no, he was with the 3rd Division when they went up to keep the mountain pass open. And the Chinaman got him with his rifle. And John put up his hands. And the guy said, Bill. The guy said, jacket. And he, you know, here's the enemy up there in that freezing winter trying to survive. So Bill took his jacket off and threw it to him and turned and ran. The guy didn't shoot him. Did not shoot him. But there's a human something. There was an exchange. You give me your jacket, I'll give you your life. Two human beings trying to survive. That's what I guess what it's all about.
Anything that you didn't?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to go back to Korea. I've met Lee Myung-bak several times, and it's a pleasure. I look forward to meeting Madam Park.